Okay, looks like we are recording too, so good. All right. We have attendees joining us. Here they come. Can you guys all see the participants at all? We've got 4 at the moment, so I'll give it a couple of minutes, see if we can get some more in the group, and then we'll get started. All right, welcome everyone. I realize that a lot of people are probably still going to be trickling in. But because we are given just 1 hour, I thought we'll get ourselves started so that we can get as much of the conversation in before we have to escort you to your next event, if that's what you're doing at 1 o'clock. So I'd like to introduce myself. I am Dr. Bri Newland. I am the academic director of the undergraduate program for the Tisch Institute for Global Sport. And I'll let my colleague introduce himself because we're going to be co-leading this program. So Dr. Kelly.
Thanks, Bri. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Daniel Kelly. I'm the Academic Director of Graduate Programs for the Preston Tisch Institute for Global Sport. It's great to meet you today and look forward to our session.
And on our call today, I'd like to introduce 3 of our wonderful adjunct professors who also are industry professionals. And I'm gonna give each of them a moment to introduce themselves, but I just would like to say thank you to Jeff, Justine, and Daniel for joining us today. And with us, or with that, let me ask you our first question. So can you please introduce yourself and explain your background in the sports industry and your current role? Jeff, let's start with you.
Sure. Well, first I want to thank Dr. Kelly and Dr. Newland for organizing this. This is a great resource for parents and alumni. I actually am an alumni of the NYU Sports Management graduate program in one of the first graduating classes back in 2007. And for the past 6 years, I've also been an adjunct instructor in sports marketing. So I've got to see this program evolve pretty much since the beginning, which has been a pretty cool experience. Outside of NYU, I started at the New York City Sports Commission, which then merged with the city's marketing and partnership organization and the Convention and Visitor Bureau, and headed up the sports marketing group for the city of New York. Through that role, became the de facto sports marketing expert for this market, for the New York City market. So worked with, every team, league, high profile events like the Super Bowl, where we shut down Times Square for a fan fest, NBA All-Star Game, WrestleMania. I was the head of the local organizing committee for the 2026 World Cup bid on behalf of New York and New Jersey. And just, basically drove anything that would drive ticket sales, revenue, audience development in this market, which is the best place on earth, but also the most complicated place to navigate. And I now, do my own marketing consulting with many of those same organizations, helping them sell tickets and grow their brand in this market.
Great, thank you, Jeff. Justine?
Hi, everybody. I am Justine Gubar. I am the executive director of the Sports Emmy Awards, which is part of the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, which is a small nonprofit. My background is journalism. I was a television producer with ESPN for 20 years. I have won some of my own Emmy Awards, which you can probably see behind me. I worked on all areas of ESPN programming, from covering the Olympics to Super Bowl to investigative and enterprise reporting. I was based in New York and San Francisco and Bristol, Connecticut for ESPN. I've also worked for other cable networks, including Fusion, which was not a break from the sports world. I did a short stint at Bleacher Report. I have written a book about sports fandom. And now I am just completing my first year with the Sports Emmys, and it's been quite an interesting year. Not what we anticipated or expected. And I will tell you my one NYU fun fact is that I grew up in the Village, literally down the street from the Tisch Institute. Washington Square Park was my playground. And it's just great to see how NYU has grown and become such an amazing integral part of the neighborhood. So I feel very connected to NYU beyond being an adjunct.
Great, thank you, Justine. And Daniel?
Sure. So my name's Dan Marcus, and as you guys can tell, I have approximately 0 Emmys. And I apologize if it looks like I'm using the mic as a prop. I just got it, so I'm working on my digital stage presence. But as far as my background in sports and my background with NYU, like Jeff, I'm an alum of the sports management program. But as an undergrad, I graduated in 2014. And really, I've taken an unconventional path in that, largely what I've been doing with my career has been primarily entrepreneurial in sports. So I started my first company, which was in the ticketing space, actually out of my NYU dorm room while I was still in the program at NYU. Around that same time, I got offered a full scholarship to law school. Another prop, I had my law degree sitting on my desk still, much to my mother's chagrin. She would hope that I frame it, but I haven't. And so I bootstrapped at the point of acquisition through law school. And since then, I've been involved in a number of different sports related and not sports related businesses, including a production company called Relentless, which builds podcasts and TV shows and documentaries around prominent sports figures like Pete Rose, a guy named Spice Adams, Ozzie Guillen, and a number of others. And then I also cover the intersection of sports and entrepreneurship for Forbes as a contributor. And then most recently, when the world went to hell in a handbasket, I've been working with a company based out of Boston that used the underlying chemical color change technology from Polaroid, the camera company, to create a rapid COVID test, another prop. I have them sitting on my desk. So it's actually a very poignant kind of discussion for me, and I'm obviously thrilled that anyone wants to listen to me speak.
Okay, fantastic. For our next question, we're going to start with Daniel. And the question is, during the past 6 months, what impact has COVID-19 had on your ability to navigate the sports environment? And Dan, you kind of talked about it a bit with your work with one of the COVID cures. Can you take us on a deeper dive into that initiative?
Sure. I mean, it's a circuitous journey. So with sports, and why I have many titles, I'm also a practicing attorney, but why I decided those 2 titles for this slide or for this presentation is because there's actually, it's 2 sides of a different coin with respect to COVID. So literally a week before the world shut down, I was offered a term sheet to have my ticketing company acquired. It's still sitting on my desk somewhere. I'm going to stop with the props. And then Rudy Gobert tested positive. And so sports was kind of the canary in the coal mine, if you will. And then everything shut down. And the notion of, sinking significant money into a platform dedicated to ticketed live events, when ticketed live events were very, very hard to project as to when they would come back, was tough. But around that same time, when one door closed, another one opened. And so circuitously through working with Pete Rose, ironically enough, his attorney had introduced me to this guy who is turns out to be the founder of Bamboo Global, which is where I'm currently serving as an entrepreneur in residence to get this COVID test out to market. And as the calamity was ensuing around me, I had found out that he was basically working on a rapid COVID test. And I sort of developed a hero complex being in Manhattan when things were peaking to say, I got to do whatever I can do to try and make this happen and try and, get these tests out into the world. And so it really wasn't formal at the time. It was just whatever I can do, whatever dots I could connect. And now we're sort of, we're chugging along. We're fighting with the FDA every day, and I can get more into the test if you're interested. But essentially, it's a tongue scrape test that's highly scalable, so you don't have to do the brain poke nasal swab. And it's one of the more rewarding things that I've done in my career. But more importantly, to tie it all together with sports, is that my thinking was that if I can solve this problem, I can bring back sports and I can get back to doing the stuff that I enjoyed. So that's how it affected me. Obviously, it blew up an opportunity to have a really nice financial windfall for me. But at the same time, it's given me an opportunity to actually to make a bigger difference beyond just simply the world of sports. And hopefully I have a hand or a very small footnote in being able to bring fans back to the stadiums and enable us to do that, not just based upon what state you live in and whether the governor's what the political persuasion of the governor is. So it's a long-winded answer to your short question, Daniel, but that's sort of how I ended up here.
No, it's a great answer too. So thank you for clarifying that it was a test more so than a cure, like I mentioned. So I appreciate that.
Oh yeah, no, I wouldn't pretend to be curing anything. I think anyone that has a cure or says they have a cure is probably selling you snake oil.
All right, so we'll move on to Justine.
Thank you. So I am not working on inventing a COVID test, but I have taken a few, all negative. So the past 6 months, COVID pretty much shut down and completely upended the work I do. The Sports Emmys are an in-person live event that takes place generally every April at Lincoln Center. We were full speed ahead, and by the end of February, things were getting weird. And as Daniel said, the night Rudy Gobert tested positive, the world came to an end. And we knew very quickly that producing a live event for over 1,000 people was not going to be viable. And that meant our revenue stream was certainly going to be challenged. The National Academy produces several different Emmy competitions. Sports was the luckiest because we were far along in our cycle. We have volunteer judges who screen all our categories. We were lucky enough that the bulk of judging, for example, was completed before everyone went into lockdown. If you thought your head was spinning, imagine being on the hook during that time to judge hours and hours of content and having me harass you via email and text to finish. So we felt very lucky that we were not in a position to be depending on people at this unprecedented, super challenging time. But what we did have to contend with was our partners being challenged by the shutdowns, people getting furloughed and laid off, people not being able to go into their office and do their jobs because broadcast centers were closed down. When we finally figured out how to move forward and hold a virtual ceremony, which we did in August, there was a lot of COVID production that we all had to get a handle on. And literally, when we did our virtual Emmy ceremony, I co-executive produced from sitting in the spot. We had a control room in Los Angeles. We had a director in Chicago and various other people from the National Academy scattered throughout the tri-state area, and we all participated via remote. And we had all of our hosts and participants connecting by remote. It was something no one had ever done before. Now everyone is mounting virtual ceremonies. Ours was completely live, which adds a whole nother piece to it because we're opening the envelopes and reading winners. It was challenging on various fronts, and on various fronts, and it really required a huge tolerance for ambiguity, the ability to be flexible and to pivot when needed, and to be able to plan and shift your plans. But it was certainly nothing we ever imagined, and we're still in the midst of it. We're now planning for next year, trying to go through a lot of the different scenarios.
All right, great, thank you. And moving on, we'll go to Jeff.
Yeah, so I mean, as an expert in creating interactive fan experiences and helping brands sell tickets, obviously it's affected a bit by this. For example, I was hired by the Atlantic 10 basketball tournament to create a fan fest outside the Barclays in March. Got about 25 NYU students as volunteers, and that was canceled 10 o'clock the night before. So probably about 12 hours before we were supposed to start that. And the number of events that have been postponed or have taken place in New York without fans, is a pretty long list. But what I have been able to do is I sort of, as Justine just said, shift my priorities or shift how I'm helping these brands. So I'm doing a lot of just creating relationships with existing people, with new people. Really, how can they connect with their loyal customers digitally, whether it's venues, teams, leagues. So it's creating those marketing campaigns and also thinking to the future, okay, whenever things do open up, how do you hit the ground running so that you can express how you have this safe environment and go from 0 to 100 very quickly. So, it would technically be pro bono because, I'm just speaking with everyone. But it's led to these new relationships and led to all these opportunities that when things open up that I didn't have beforehand, where I'm just as busy and just speaking with as many people, just sort of shifting it to a lot more forward facing and ideas than actually planning the events themselves in the moment.
Great, thank you, Jeff. Switching gears now that sport has started to return, yay. I know my Nebraska Cornhuskers are playing for the first time this weekend, so I'm super excited the Big Ten is back. But now that there has been a return of professional sport and collegiate sport, how has that impacted your current role now that we're starting to see some events come back? We'll start with you this time, Justine.
Okay. Well, it has made us happy to know that sports are back, but as an organization that interfaces with the behind the scenes sports production people, it's been a challenge in trying to support those people because they're going into unknown situations, traveling, doing production in different ways. And I've heard a lot of anxiety from people, and it's difficult. And even as simple as going into a broadcast center, there are a lot of steps people have to take now. So I would say the biggest impact is just responding to the realities. And we are now prepping for the next Emmy Awards cycle. We generally open up for entries in December. People submit content from the calendar year, and we're talking through with our media partners as to what constraints COVID has added to their productions, and do we need to change some of our categories, change some of our rules because production looks different? Are there things we need to acknowledge? Are there different roles that people are playing? it's good news that our media partners have revenue coming in, and they're back in business and they're optimistic. Some of them have weathered unfortunate layoffs and continue to weather unfortunate layoffs in the sports production world. But people are feeling optimistic. They're getting through their seasons. We finished NBA, we finished NHL, it's the World Series, Big Ten football starting this week. So fingers are crossed.
Great, thank you. Jeff, how about you take it this time next?
Sure. Well, I mean, I echo your excitement of Big Ten football. I'm a Wisconsin Badger alum. They start tonight. But yeah, I mean, the biggest takeaway is, I think, the saying is like absence makes the heart grow fonder. I think we all saw that just because sports disappeared for a few months, it didn't go off people's minds. They came back and consumed it, even more so. There were things that occupied us in that meantime. I loved watching the documentary Tiger King. And I lived without sports. And if you told me, could I live without sports for 3 months? I'd be like, no way, I need this. But when it came back, I didn't, I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to watch documentaries instead. I consumed even more than I did beforehand. And I think that's really promising. And I think that's sort of the sentiment I'm expressing with all my partners, all the leagues and teams. So it's just a matter of being ready. We don't know when that is, but when it does happen, understanding that there was no replacement for going to a live sporting event or rooting for your team. My wife started cutting my 2-year-old's hair during pandemic and realized that she can do it. There's a change to consumer habits. She can do it just as, even cheaper. She can do it just as well. So there's an easy replacement. And there is no easy replacement for sports. There was nothing that filled that void. And I think that's promising. We can, that multi-billion-dollar industry that was there beforehand, that's still here. And it's just a matter of being ready and prepared and getting everyone on the same page so they can hit the ground running when that opens up. Because like I said earlier, it's going to go from 0 to 100. And people that are realizing that like they miss this experience part, the being there live, and there's nothing that replaces that. So I think you're going to see such a huge uptick when things do open up safely. And so it's just, there is optimism there, and watching that on TV and even watching those fans down in the SEC country filling the stadium, I don't necessarily agree with. It sort of scares me, but it just shows you sports fans are a different breed and they want to support. Anything they can do, they will do to show their support.
Just a real quick follow-up for you, Jeff. Have you, in your discussions now, since you can't actually do activations, are there discussions on how those activations might change in the future at all? Or do you think they'll go back to similar types of experiences that you designed in the past?
Yeah, I mean, the Fan Fest will eventually come back, but I don't think that's happening right away. I think it's more, smaller things, or getting people's email address digitally or virtually. At some point, the Fan Fest will come back where you can get the random people walking by the Barclays Center, or, events in New York City. But that's definitely, when we're talking about hitting the ground running, that's definitely not in this immediate next steps. Just being realistic of, any event where you're getting people to line up or cluster around something, and this, first step isn't really there. So it's trying to figure out those virtual ways, or, through apps or through different mechanisms. And apps is probably one of the biggest discussions we've been having. All these organizations had them, but they probably weren't utilizing them as much. So now it's sort of like, okay, maybe allocate some resources towards that way. And again, all of it leads to, when they do come back, being able to reach people and touch people in different ways.
Great, thank you. Dan, how has the return of sport impacted you?
I mean, though I love sports, as a New York Jets fan, I mean, just nothing but angst and agita since sports has come back. But, professionally speaking, because I'm all over the map, there's been pluses and minuses and pros and cons across the board. The thing that the void that not having sports left was the fact that I think everyone remembers when The Last Dance came out and the ratings that did, and the Twitter hubbub that was happening around it. So for me, as someone who likes to develop projects in sports, I mean, there was now, or at least in that moment in time, there was a huge appetite for it because there was a huge void. So I saw some traction on different projects that were, up to that point stagnant. But out of the more superficial realm into the more impactful realm, it's just made me work harder with respect to trying to bring this COVID test that I've been working on / with to market, because the clock is ticking. Someone's going to figure this out. As someone who knows way too much about this, yeah, I echo Jeff's sentiments about the SEC and what they're doing being scary. They're using a sort of a damn the torpedoes approach when it comes to public health, which I think is comes with its own issues. But at a certain point, we're going to know enough by the time these next seasons come around, in my opinion, about the virus, about what you can do safely, what you can't do safely, and there's going to be innovations that enable it too. And I'm hoping to be one of those, or I'm hoping to make the thing that I'm working on one of those innovations and one of those accelerants that can make it happen. So for me, it's just been, okay, the clock's ticking even louder for me. And how do I make sure that we're a part of this and we play a meaningful role? So I'd say on balance, it's been positive, notwithstanding the football team I root for.
Hey,
Thank
great.
you.
The next question is about networking and opportunities and all the changes that have happened due to the restrictions from COVID-19. Hopefully, I know that Dan and Jeff are aware that the Tisch Institute has created a sports industry networking database as a means of assisting students in connecting with alumni. Do you have any best practices that have worked for you as far as navigating the networking aspect of your career path during the restrictions of COVID-19? We'll start with Jeff for this one.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think the most obvious thing here that I'm sure everybody would say is LinkedIn. I mean, it's always been an important tool, but now, it allows people, now that there's some downtime, or at least you're at home, allows people to connect with people they might not have connected with. But I, want to stress, especially for either current students or new alumni, it's really easy to connect with people, but be careful that you don't just sending out 50 invitations with no notes doesn't solve anything. It's really finding people that would match with you, especially, utilizing the NYU network, as Dr. Kelly said, both in the database that you created and on LinkedIn. There's easy ways of finding, NYU grad and just sending a quick note saying, here, I just want 20 minutes of your time. Can I pick your brain? Not asking for a job. And creating a network that way, not just adding as many numbers as you can, but creating real relationships. So if there is a job or something down the line, there's someone that spoke with you for 15 minutes and can say, okay, he or she was prepared. They were funny. I got a sense of who they were and can point you in the right direction. So it's a matter of taking this time off or slower time and making those connections. If I get anything from anybody from NYU saying they want to speak with me or have a question, anything short of saying like, help me move out of my apartment, I answer. I want to help in any way. And I think a lot of people fall into that category. So identifying them on LinkedIn or whatever networks you have, using that database and using this time to just pick someone's brain for 15, 20 minutes.
All right, thank you. That's great advice. We'll go to Justine next.
I echo what Jeff said. I tell people all the time, don't be shy about reaching out and pursuing people in your network. People on like from my end actually enjoy it and like to give back and like to help people. I consider every time I help an alumni of my school an in-kind donation, so I can donate less money at the end of the year. And it's enjoyable for me. I find it to be a two-way street. There are many of my former students who I actually recruited to help us with the virtual Emmy ceremonies. We needed stand-ins this year. And, if I had a Zoom coffee with someone, I said, hey, what are you doing next week? We might need a virtual stand-in. And people were happy to do it. And they got an interesting experience out of it. So I urge people not to be shy. I urge people to realize that their connections get something out of the conversation as well. Know that everyone is going through what you are going through. They're locked up at home. It's harder to connect with people. It's a little bit awkward, but I mean, I spend all my day on Zoom. We're used to it. It's okay to ask someone for Zoom coffee. I also recommend that people take advantage of all the virtual events that are out there. There's so many events that are free these days and they're high value. You can really tap into a lot of interesting speakers and situations with a lot of research. You can find people you want to speak with who are speaking to a group and do your background research that way. I definitely RSVP to more events than I could ever attend, but it's nice to have the option pop up in my calendar. So that's something else I'd recommend to people. As I was optimistic about the sports world coming back, I am also optimistic about opportunities and the ability for people to network and meet people during this time.
Okay, thank you, Justine. Before I go to Dan Marcus, I do want to respond to one of the comments in the chat box from a attendee, Sarah Jackson. We've been working on the sports industry networking database as a supplement to the larger efforts, which are through the NYU Violet Network. And we've been trying to get current students to help spearhead a campaign to increase alumni engagement in the Violet Network. And so the sports industry networking database is a smaller project where we're able to set up mentorship arrangements between alumni and current students. And so all of our efforts go into the NYU Violet Network. And so I want to definitely advocate for the Violet Network moving forward. Dan, if you can give us any of your best practices for networking as far as navigating the restrictions from COVID-19, that would be great.
Sure. I mean, I think just in my experience, I think the word networking gets a very sort of sometimes a negative connotation. It misconstrues what the most important thing is in this business. And, sports, just like any other business, is a people business, right? I think sports more so than any other one. And so for me, it's a little bit different because, since I endeavored to just rub two sticks together and try to build a software platform without knowing anything about software, it's always been predicated on one cold email or several at a time. And so that's largely been my approach anyway. And I think honing that is really important, and getting good at it. And so, I was working, not to sound like a hipster, but I was working at home before it was cool to work at home, because I prefer it. But it's also, one of those things where like I'm always on the phone every day, pre-COVID, post-COVID. So it didn't really change for me. And, I think when you endeavor to do something from the ground up, it's always hard to do by yourself. And you always want to enlist partners, et cetera. And you would be shocked. Maybe you wouldn't be shocked. How many people just appreciate, to borrow a phrase, the chutzpah it takes to just, this is who I am. This is what I'm doing. Pay attention. And so in that sense, I don't think anything's fundamentally changed for me. Yeah, I'm doing less in-person meetings, and I bought a microphone, which you guys can all see. But I don't think anything's fundamentally changed for me. Actually, I think doing that on a one-to-one basis is better than the speed dating component of these quote unquote networking events where there's business cards handed out and these very shallow 10-minute conversations. Some people are a fan of it. I'm less so. But either way, I mean, for me, with things changing so fundamentally, it was sort of just repositioning my network. And because I was, what I'm doing, we're endeavoring to solve such a big problem, that there was just a lot of people willing to help. And it was amazing, especially in New York. We were trying to I was trying to find people that may have been exposed during the peak of the pandemic and get them beta kits just to test them. And so even doing some simple stuff like putting out that message on the WeWork online network, the outpouring people that were willing to help, et cetera, was amazing. So for me, it's just a different story. But the fundamentals of what I do in terms of how networking works for me, or how I expand or leverage my network, hasn't changed. It also, for me, it also helps like having a platform like a Forbes when I want to use it, because that opens a lot of doors as well, because everyone wants to be in the Forbes magazine at some point. So it enables a lot of conversation. So I have a lot of tools at my disposal that not everyone has. But, you know, in the vein of practicing what I preach, if there are people that want to connect with me personally on this, you could just get me at Dan at any of the domains that I own. So I'm sure my LinkedIn is out there. And so anyone that wants to reach out can reach out. And if if I can help, I'm always happy to help.
Great, thanks, Dan. So I'm sure that we have a lot of parents on the call in addition to our alumni, and not only are they probably concerned, but I know many of our students are worried about attaining a job post-graduation. So I'd like to get your thoughts on what advice you might have for them as they, graduate and embark on their careers. Let's start with Dan. We'll start with you this time since you were last on the last one.
Sure. I mean, I hope this doesn't come off as a cynical take, but I think you have to come into the sports world with eyes wide open, and understand, what's the apex of what you're trying to do, and you might not even know. A lot of people don't, and so to think that you're going to become the next general manager of a professional sports team. I mean, I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm just saying you have to come in with eyes wide open as to what that path is, how you forge it. Maybe there are tangential ways to go there. I went to law school, but my path was very much different, both traditional in some sense, but traditional in other, non-traditional in others. And so I think it goes back to the networking question, which is we work in a more so who you know versus what you know kind of business. And I think most people on this panel, most people on this call, or most people on this conference right now would echo that same sentiment. And so it's never too early to start putting yourself out there in different ways. And, for me, I'm biased. And so I think if you wanted to start something, there's no better time than now. And even during a pandemic, there's no better time than now. So even if it's something that's a small scale, you want to do an event, you want to do whatever. My thinking is that, you should do it because it opens up a lot of doors, and it means just as much as a job would, in the event that, there aren't the same amount of jobs or the caliber of jobs that you're looking at or looking for. Youth is fleeting. That's always been my sort of driving force. Youth is fleeting, and you only have so much time to do something and take big risks and take big swings at doing something really memorable, until life catches up to you. You have a family, you have obligations, etc. And so I'd say, yeah, job is one thing, but use this as an opportunity to try a bunch of different things, even though they might sound crazy, even though your parents might frown at them. At least that's my take, but maybe it's a little controversial and unorthodox one.
Great, thanks, Dan. Justine, what is your advice?
Well, I didn't think that was so controversial, Dan. I'm in agreement with most of that.
Okay,
I will also say that I think students need to be prepared in terms of sports networks, which is an area I'm most familiar with, for lots of change. But change does not mean extinction at all. And I know one of the presidents of a major sports division sent around a memo to his team this week after an earnings call that change is a constant, and people just need to be able to adapt and prepare and move with whatever is presented to them. And that's a little bit of what I talked about before, but it doesn't mean that there's not opportunity. It just may mean that opportunity is slightly less predictable at this time. I do believe that students are in a great position when we're talking about technology and communications and production, because back in the day when myself and my peers were getting into the business, we specialized in one thing, and technology has shifted. So whereas people getting into the business these days have multifaceted skills and can do so many different things and bring so many different contributions that people of my era were just not trained for. And I think that makes students and recent alums so valuable to the working world that it shouldn't be discounted. And then I will say about sports networks is there is an arms race that continues for broadcast rights. Sports networks, even if they're laying off people, are still poised to pay billions and billions of dollars, literally, for the rights to broadcast and stream major sporting properties. And with those billions of dollars spent comes opportunity. They need people to market these properties. They need people to produce these properties. So it doesn't mean that there is no opportunity. In fact, there's great opportunity. You just need to be open and positioned for it. And hopefully we have given you guys a couple of nuggets that will help you position yourself for these things.
Great, thank you, Justine. And to wrap up this question, Jeff, what's some advice you'd give?
Sure, yeah, and I really want to echo Justine's sentiment of, that it's, jobs will, ramp up, companies will ramp up once they get back to some of their pre-COVID revenue streams. But I think looking at something in this, I'm just doing marketing, or I'm just doing social media, I'm just doing sales, those days I think are long gone. And I think that was even heading in that direction before all of this. But if, companies, got rid of whole divisions or laid off or furloughed. And I think those divisions are going to come back. They're just going to come back in a different way. So if there was a 10-person group, then maybe it's a 5-person group, but you're able to do more things. And you need to have that knowledge base of social media or marketing and sales. And you don't need to be an expert in all three. You just need to, I'm an expert in these two. And when you're on your job interview saying, like, listen, like, I speak with students all the time, and that, they'll say you need familiarity in these, like, in these, programs. I'm like, I don't know this. I'm like, okay, well, you do know these other 2 things, 3 things. You just need to express to them, listen, I can learn these parts. So just the more diverse you are, and again, I teach that in my class where we go through these semester-long projects, and I make them do every aspect. So they can talk about an interview, all the different aspects, and not just say, here, I want to work on PR, because there's no singular job like that anymore. So it's a matter of getting this skill set, and if you don't have it, I just did a online seminar on TikTok and how it works, how sports entities can use it. I know I'm never going to be the audience. I know I'm never going to make a TikTok, but at least I want to be able to knowledgeably talk about it, when I am working with my partners. So it's getting a skill set, and also to Dan's point, doesn't necessarily, your dream job right now doesn't have to be the Mets or the Yankees or the NFL. There's a lot of smaller companies. So it's keeping your options open, understanding that you can do a lot in a smaller company, which can then in turn, make you more marketable, down the line to one of these, dream organizations. But it's having that, diverse skill set that can really separate you from someone that doesn't have a sports management degree and didn't take all these classes and realize the different points that go into, in the sports industry.
Jeff, I'm disappointed that you're not going to actually start a TikTok. That's,
Oh man, I don't get it. I've watched it and I still don't get it, even after the seminar. But I know it's a thing, and I know
could be an entirely second career for you, or
I know I'm a good dancer, kind of.
Okay.
That's a really good point, though, about taking this time to upskill in different areas. And I think you raised a really good point, Jeff, where our younger demographics are definitely more used to these programs, but they don't necessarily know how to use them for sport and for promotional opportunities and things like that. It's one thing to make a dance that goes viral. It's another to make content that will go viral for your sport entity. So that's a really good point of like finding new ways to upskill so that you can use that to your advantage. So thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
All right, so that concludes our panel. Thank you very much for our panelists for their wise responses to our questions. For the rest of the time, Daniel and I would like to share some of the new and exciting updates that are happening in our programs. My program is in its final stages of gaining approval from the state, so we're hopeful that we'll be able to move forward with the new curriculum in this spring, but definitely it will be going into place in the fall. And one of the things that's really unique about how the undergrad program has changed is it had been stagnant for a very long time. And I think while it had a really strong bones, if you will, it wasn't really keeping up with what the industry was doing and the skills that the industry needed our graduates to have when they entered the workforce. So we really did a strong review of what we had on offer and what we could do to make the program a lot stronger. And so our new core requirements are really reflect the industry need. And in addition, the courses also reflect the mission of our program. For example, one of our cornerstones as part of our mission are to build ethical leaders, and yet we didn't have a class on ethics. And so we had components of ethics within our courses, but we didn't have any that was dedicated specifically to ethical leadership and decision making. And so that is now one of our new core classes, in addition to some of the others that we've added to the program. In addition, in our old curriculum, we have concentrations, which the students would opt into. We had a choice of 4: operations management, event management, sport media, and marketing and sport law. And we found that a lot of by having concentrations, it didn't give a lot of flexibility as far as other courses students could take to, basically build their skill set a bit broader. And so we've done away with the concentrations, and now students can focus, if they choose, on creating their own degree program with their professional electives based on the interests they might have. Or we've also created professionalization tracks so they can specialize into certain areas if they choose. These are not set in stone. So let's say I have a student that decides that he or she might want to specialize into sports law, but then at some point realizes, you know what, that's not, I want to check out some other classes in analytics. They would have the flexibility to do that. They're not set into that specialization track. Whereas in our past curriculum, once you chose that concentration, you had to finish out that concentration. So this new program gives them a lot more flexibility. With that being said, they can have that structure if they choose. And so we've designed specific tracks and broadened them out. So we still have event management, media, marketing, and law, but we've also expanded into sport analytics, entrepreneurship, and sport tech and innovation. So it really gives the student an opportunity to expand their skill set and really develop a more broad understanding and knowledge base for the industry. And so we're really excited to have this go into place. I know Justine just turned her camera off real quick, but one of the classes that's coming on that Justine will be teaching for us is called From Field to Film, the Making of the Sport Documentary. So we're really excited. Students are going to be able to create their own documentaries, as part of the class. And Justine will be leading that class for us. So, taking such great experience from the field and being able to put that in the classroom with a special class like this, we're really excited to launch. So we're happy that we get to have an Emmy winner on our adjunct faculty that can really develop these students in this area and teach them the skills to make a short documentary. So excited about that. So thanks, Justine. And so that's the undergrad, and I'm going to turn it over to my counterpart, Dr. Kelly, to talk about the updates for the grad program.
All right, then thank you, Bri. As Bri mentioned, the improvements to the MS in Sport Business program have been phenomenal. We have been recently achieved our approval for a new curriculum, which will go into effect during the fall of 2021. And so over the course of the next year, we'll begin the marketing and outreach for incoming students to join that program. In addition to the improvements to the program, one of the ones I'm most proud of is that we've decreased the total course credits from 42 to 36. And so the significance of this program is that it puts us in complete competition with our marketplace. And so universities like Ohio University, as well as Columbia University, Georgetown, et cetera, we are on par with them as far as the degree requirements. And so now we actually compete apples to apples with every other program in our field for the master's degree. Additionally, we have improved our coursework. We're trying to keep up to where the marketplace is, and so improvements in courses for digital media and marketing, technology and innovation. Our sports law courses are now featuring international sports law and global aspects, and then increasing our sports analytics offerings to not only offer baseball analytics, basketball analytics, but also our gridiron analytics and soccer analytics courses to complement our fundamentals of sports analytics courses. And then additionally, of course, Dan Marcus is one of our instructors for our esports management course. And so as we continue to bring out new courses in blockchain and to increase our course offerings, it's exciting to know that we're keeping pace with what's available in the marketplace. And so I'm most proud of, for the spring semester, we're launching 2 brand new elective courses, one in sports diplomacy, which is going to take a global look at the impact of the Olympics and the geopolitical aspects of sport and how sport has been used for security and peace around the world for diplomatic missions with the United Nations, et cetera. Additionally, we have a brand new course starting in the spring called Design Thinking and Innovation in Sport, which is going to take a consulting strategies look at the marketplace for sport management and use design thinking as the framework for tackling business solutions in sport management. And so overall, I'm really excited about the pivot in the program to provide the applied research and the applied learning for our students as they enter the marketplace. Additionally, we still have our staple programming for the graduate students and undergrad. We have our Tisch Sports programming, our Tisch Bowl, as well as our case competitions. And then moving on to our MS in Global Sports program, which is a brand new program. We actually just launched our cohort number 2 model, and we are planning, the planning is already in place for cohort model number 3. And so the MS in Global Sports program is a comprehensive curriculum that takes a global look at what is happening in the sport management world from the perspective of the international marketplace. And so this online asynchronous program is about 65% online. And then for the in-person aspect, we would take residencies on a weekly basis around the globe. Due to the limitations of COVID, we've had to revamp that system to make sure the students get their international experience. But this program is fantastic. We have a cohort model of about 10 to 12 students per semester, and it allows for us to take them through the different aspects of the sport management curriculum from a global perspective. And so this program is geared towards professionals who are full-time professionals in the field and don't have the opportunity to come to New York for their education. So we kind of bring the education to them virtually. And then we use the in-person residencies as an opportunity to give them the added bonus of the case study model. And so overall, both of these graduate programs are experiencing high success during COVID-19, and we're really excited for the future of both of these graduate programs.
Great, thank you, Daniel. And just quickly, I wanted to, before we wrap up today, I just wanted to give you some information on how you can stay connected. We talked about the Violet Network, and so we urge you to join that, as well as you're more than welcome to get in touch with Dr. Kelly if you are an alumni of our program as well, to just make sure that we have your most recent details to connect with you, because we do certainly love to connect our alumni to our undergraduate and graduate students as much as possible, whether that be through guest speaking opportunities or industry and alumni events that we hold. And things like that. So we certainly would love to make sure you're in our network if we have any alumni on the call today. And so here are just some ways that you can connect with us from the alumni perspective. And if you see my screen here, I have also added our Tisch Institute Twitter and Instagram handles if you'd like to follow us. Follow our program specifically. So we are, and with that, I will turn it over to Daniel for one last word.
All right. At this time, I'd like to thank our panelists, Daniel Marcus, Jeff Mole, and Justine Gubar. And we're really excited for your support of our program and really impressed with your navigation of the sports industry field, as well as your career paths. So thank you.
Anything for you, Dan.
for having us. Appreciate it.
And then one last comment. As I mentioned earlier, the Violet Network is our primary resource for alumni engagement. We will post the sports industry networking database to the Violet Network. And so if you're interested in interacting directly or mentoring with some of our current students, that'll be the apparatus for where you can link with me and make that connection. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.